I was already into hip hop culture, you know. It's important for people to know now in 2014 that graffiti comes from hip hop, you know. And back in the 90s and in the 80s and the 70s, if you were doing graffiti, you were genuinely into hip hop. Now, it's not like that. Now you could be a skater or a punk rocker and do graffiti. You know what I mean? Back then, the graffiti artists were into hip hop. You know what I mean? So I was a breakdancer. I was a b-boy. So I naturally got into graffiti because I was artistic and it was the art of hip hop.
Just like lifestyle, I was into skateboarding and shit disturbing, basically. You know, it sort of came with everything. I found like there was always graffiti around, and like, I don't know, but just noticing it at an early age, you know, you just start to look for it everywhere. And like, man, I remember before I even started writing, like I would go on school field trips and shit, just glued out the bus window looking for anything I could find, from like, you know, a rooftop burner to a hand style. When I first started writing, I think I was maybe 12 or 13, and the first thing I wrote was Entity, which is it was just this idea of like being a singular entity. And I was really, do you know who Titty Freak is? He's from Sao Paulo. He's like a really versatile, super talented writer, but there was like a little bit of inspiration from that. But yeah, it was probably 12, 13.
Started doing graffiti in late 1992. That's when I started graffiti. Just tagging at first, right? Yeah. And then, you know, getting a sketchbook and practicing, and then eventually by 1993, I did my first piece with spray paint. So for almost a year, I just did it in books and tagged, you know, around the street.
I like to think that it's, to say the least, a little bit different. I have a lot of respect and admiration for the more like abstracted styles of graffiti, like, you know, your classic like New York and LA pieces. They had a bit more influence when I was younger, but eventually I really started liking clean, graphic, big, bold, colorful pieces that, you know, were more about the manipulation of letters beyond convention rather than like consistency throughout. So I don't know, man. When I paint now, it's a fusion. It's somewhere between like, you know, old school New York and Nixon.
I think my pieces have influenced a lot of different people because of my cleanliness. I think I raised the bar for clean graffiti in Toronto. Definitely, 100%. Because I've always been clean, and people have always said, you know, even guys I paint with, like, oh, you know, I want to be as clean as you. So they see my pieces, and whenever I paint with them, you know, I used to put people to shame when I used to do a piece beside someone and they weren't as clean as me, and they would say, man, you know, I gotta get as clean as you. So I think I've influenced a lot of people in the city and actually in the whole country, doing cleaner graffiti, like straighter lines, better can control, stuff like that. Because you can go to Quebec and you can go to Ottawa, and you can go to Vancouver, you can go to Calgary, you can go to Winnipeg, you can go all over Canada, and if people know who I am, a lot of the graffiti artists know who I am, the first thing they're going to say is, yeah, Scam's super clean.
It's just freedom. It's really just another modality of communication. I think it's one of the most crucial tools for interacting with your environment and really feeling invested in a space. Because it's such an internal thing. Like when you, I don't know, it makes you just appreciate your surroundings so much more, and our physicality so much more. It's really like a humbling experience to be a graffiti writer for me, and like I think it's kind of interesting to say that because for a lot of graffiti writers it's such an ego trip, you know. But when I don't know, I don't really care who sees my name. It's more about that output and the action itself, and then that silent gratification, you know, to yourself and to your homies that just like they know what's up, and that's sort of all you need.
My pieces are very personal, you know. I don't even care if no one likes it, except for me, you know. It's me, right? I'm basically writing my name. That's all I'm doing. You know what I mean? But people like it for different aspects. People like it for the colors. I usually get commented on that, like, "Oh, I love your colors," or "How clean I am," or how many cool designs are in the piece, or something like that. To me, that doesn't matter. It's like the outline and the design, and I do it for me. You know, I could care less of what people think of my graffiti because it's not for them. It's for me, but because it's public, then it automatically makes it for them because it's public and they can open their eyes and go visit it and look at it. Right? It's not in my basement or something. You know, so it's a weird thing because it's personal for me, but at the same time, because I'm doing it in a public space, it's for everyone. But really, it's just for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really, it's just for me, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's a toy, you know, when they begin, you know, because you're trying to learn the ropes and trying to get your foot in the door in the streets and the culture of graffiti, you know. I was a toy, everyone was a toy, you know, and everyone could say that. Every king could say that they were a toy. You know what I mean? You can talk to like kings from the 80s and they'll say that they were toys in the 70s, you know what I mean? So, you know, everyone starts off as a toy, as a beginner. A toy just means a beginner. Do you know what I mean? A toy doesn't necessarily has to stay a toy all their career. A toy can evolve and become a king. Do you know what I mean? And but there's different definitions that I think a toy is, because some guys I think are toy even though they've put in work because they don't have the respect. You know, I think a toy is someone who's inexperienced. A toy can be someone who's inexperienced, like a beginner, but a toy can also be someone who has skill but has no respect for someone who's been there 10 years before them, 15 years before them.
Honestly, I hate that word because I feel like it gets vastly overused. On one hand, like a toy is essentially what you would attribute to, like a title you give to somebody who doesn't have all their bases covered in terms of technical capability and then etiquette as well. But I think ultimately, like, a toy is just somebody who likes the idea of the lifestyle but isn't prepared to actually invest.
I've experimented with a lot of drugs, you know, and I don't do drugs now, but when I was younger, I tried and I experimented just like, you know, most people do growing up. I honestly believe if I wasn't into graffiti, I'd either be dead, in jail, or a drug addict. I always tell my girlfriend this, I always tell, you know, people who are close to me my story, because graffiti really saved my life.
I think I had mushrooms first time when I was 16, or so. And what I really brought out of that from was, you know, the subtleties in our environment and like the value of our surroundings. But it also played a huge role in dropping conventional filters towards your creative output. When you have a tool like many psychedelics, like mushrooms and acid, I find are really effective in doing this. But it just it breaks down those barriers, so your self-criticism goes away. And I think as an artist, it's very important to like constantly be criticizing, but to not be critical of yourself, you know, and just separate that which you make from that which you are.
The guys who inspired me were mostly guys from New York, because at that time I didn't see much graffiti. There was graffiti in Toronto, but it was scarce. You know, now you can walk almost anywhere downtown and see a tag or a throw up or a piece. It wasn't like that back then. It was very underground, and the guys who influenced me were guys in books and in movies, like famous guys from New York and things like that, you know, guys like Scene and Futura and Dondi and Zephyr, and, you know what I mean? When I started graffiti in Toronto, I actually thought I was the first graffiti artist in Toronto because I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, you know, there was guys like Ren and all these guys from before me, do you know what I mean? But that's how scarce it was. You know, there wasn't any tags, like, there was nothing.
Well, you know, it's hard to say because there's so many super talented people and different people for different reasons. So I was living out in Vancouver for the last few years, and a couple of the guys out there that really just like got me charged on, you know, moving beyond the letters themselves and like, you know, considering the whole. A couple guys that really like inspired me there were Jay Nasty for one. Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, so Jay Nasty, like the whole Die by the Can Boys crew, you know, Cash, Theme, those guys have just got it on lock, and their energy behind what they do is for the right reasons. Like they're just fucking super talented, a super talented crew that knows how to, you know, keep the fire under their own ass. And like I'm sure you know who Quest is, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, he was the first one that really just blew my mind, because there's all like coming in from you know, London way on the 401. Like once you start getting to more of the industrial edge, just past Mississauga, like he used to have all these killer huge burners that just like blow your mind. Even still, it's like he's a madman, but when you're a kid, it just kind of shakes you up a little more. Yeah, just people that are deviating from what I've come to expect of most graffiti writers before they prove me otherwise. You know, like I just really respect people that, like you say, are getting away from the ego aspect of it, because, you know, it's more selfless than it seems when you're, you know, putting something into a public space. Well, it always depends on the project. I started painting alone, essentially. Like, there were buddies around that were into it, but it was one of those things that, for more of the conception of my graffiti career, I painted alone. And I find, like, when I paint alone, there's always that sensory elevation that I don't get when I'm painting with a crew of people. The cockiness that comes when you're with a group of people is sometimes nice to just put on the back burner when you go out with yourself, because, you know, you're your only set of eyes, you're your only set of legs. Like, you don't have that network to fall back on when you're doing things with the crew. But that being said, that's another huge advantage of being with the crew, is that you can focus more on your output and less about all the other factors that come into the mix just to paint.
So I'm in DOH. I was in HSA when HSA was around. I'm in several crews from the States, which I'm very proud of, because I'm in the crew called Chaos Inc. You've probably seen it on my tags and my Instagram. That's a crew that goes back since the 80s that used to do trains, New York trains. So in other words, I'm affiliated with an original crew out of New York. Do you know what I mean? And I'm very proud of that. That's probably the most proud crew I'm in, because they actually did graffiti on the New York trains. Well, I was fortunate that early in my graffiti career, I started doing a lot of commercial jobs, and I started accumulating a lot of legal walls. So I didn't do too much illegal stuff. You know what I mean? So I was lucky because you start doing, when you do graffiti, you start doing stuff that's illegal.
No, I've never been pinched, and it's a case where, as I said, like, I'm an artist as well. I try really hard to keep my output in balance. By that, like, I know I have to paint. Like, I go crazy when I don't. But it's a case of being more conscious of the things that I paint and the places that I paint them, and then balancing that out with other creative projects so that I don't have to just go down the graffiti rabbit hole. But no, I haven't been caught. I've been chased a number of times, but yeah, I try to stay smart. I try to think 2 steps ahead about worst case scenarios. There's been more times than I can count that I've come too fucking close, but that's the game, right? Oh man, so my buddy Achilles and me were down in Montreal this summer for Under Pressure, and we were partying all day and just like totally fucked out of our heads by 5 o'clock. But it was like 8 o'clock. We decided to go painting on Saint Laurent, which, like, Friday night, so fucking busy, so many people, and we were just like painting, literally, not concerning ourselves with too much. And then all of a sudden we got rolled on by like 4 police vans, and my buddy Achilles, he right away, like, he threw his paint over a fence and just booked it. And I casually just walked off to the side down this alley as like 4 cops rolled right past me, like hands covered in paint. I'm probably like 20 cans in a reusable shopping bag, and like they're chasing after my buddy just because, he sort of the moment he ran, it was a case where, he deemed himself guilty. But then as I'm walking away, he's just gone, no cell phone, anything like that, so I don't know if he's gotten pinched or whatever. But then I met these, I was kind of lingering around, and these 5 huge black guys roll up to me, and the one that was sort of leading them, he had his right hand just clutched in a fist, and I'm thinking, oh fuck. They're like, hey, just shouting at me. So I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, I'm gonna have to fucking weasel my way out of this. And these guys rolled up, scared shitless, and he's like, hey, man, you got a rolling paper? And he opens up his fist, and he's got like a palm full of weed. And yeah, I guess these guys, they had just come down from their first ever mushroom trip, and they've just gotten to Canada as well. So they're having like the best fucking time of their life, and they just sort of came up to me in a parking lot. So I ended up going out for like the next 5 hours with this group of this huge crew of random black guys that don't know anything about, graph, but they had just come off this mushroom trip, and it was just like one of the most ridiculous experiences I've ever had. Yeah, because these guys just like, they bounce everything I painted. Like they cover all angles, and nobody was fucking with shit. And turns out that my buddy, he ended up getting chased for 45 minutes, and he had to hide under a barbecue where they keep those propane tanks.
It comes from my rough childhood. That's where it comes from. You know, it keeps me going. It's my soul. You know what I mean? And it keeps me going. I had a really rough childhood growing up. I had to move out and live on my own when I was, just a teenager. And I had to be independent really quick. And graffiti is now, after doing it, now I'm in my 40s. After doing it for over 20 something years, I can say graffiti is true happiness to me. You know, there's nothing that I can compare graffiti to. You know what I mean? Yeah. For me, I'm talking for me. It just brings me so much joy. You know, I painting is like my therapy. So that's how I can answer that. You know, that's where I get motivated, because I had such a rough childhood growing up, and I have all these negative memories about growing up and stuff. When I paint, it takes me away from all that stuff. You know what I mean? And it's my therapy.
Yeah, so I really want to go to Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil. A really good buddy of mine, he writes Butso. And I met him in Vancouver, but he's got some really good connections all over South America. And in terms of cities, like there's 22 million people there, and it just sounds like such a free-for-all. But the scene in Brazil especially is just so organic and raw. You know, the traditional conventions of graffiti didn't really sink in, and because of that, you know, the content matter is all over the fucking place. But yeah, I'd really just like to go somewhere that is a little bit less concerned with the alteration of surfaces.
I would love to go to Europe and paint all over Europe, anywhere in Europe. I'd love to go to Asia and paint. I would just love to travel more and just get my art out there more. You know what I mean? I basically have done a lot of North American cities, mostly in the East Coast, but I would love to do more of, I would love to go to Central America, like places like Brazil and Colombia and like Mexico and places like that to do graffiti. But for sure, Europe and Asia would be good.
I don't know where it's gonna go, but I know it's gonna stay right here. We can anticipate our future all we want, but I think it doesn't matter if we're not satisfied with where we are right now. Like that's what we need to focus on, is being happy with what graffiti is now, so that we don't have to even speculate on the future.
I think it's just getting bigger and bigger because it's everywhere in the world. Now you have festivals in Miami, in Hawaii, all over Europe. People are there's now something called a professional graffiti artist. Like people, I'm not the only one that lives off of it. You know what I mean? A ton of people live off of graffiti. So I think it's just getting bigger and bigger. And the generation, you know, I mean, all the people that were ignorant about it in the past, that didn't like it, were older folks, right? Older than me. Now they're in their 60s or 70s, right? Now the CEOs and the companies and the people who are leading this world are closer to my age, right? Graffiti is their artwork. That's what they grew up on. You know what I mean? So I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger.